this season. The advantages of appropriation current copyright law fails to protect indigenous creative works, perpetuating a violent history of cultural dispossession. As 321 copyright include products as long as those met the requirement of being writing or fixed indigenous works have not created but in collective memory, culture, in the public domain, and appropriated borrowing culture for educational purposes, common indigenous communities have appropriations offensive unauthorized use, while within various exception, reproduction, exotic commodity, private form of appropriation causing significant harm through dispossession. Appropriation of culture represents the ongoing dispossession of indigenous sovereignty and self-determination by the settler state. This cultural commodification compounds psychological, political, and violent harms upon indigenous communities. 321 copyright fails to protect indigenous creativity, diversity, autonomy, self-determination, actively dispossessing indigenous culture, excluded cultural relegated to the public domain, informed conquest and legitimizing settler state as appropriation as continuation of settler colonialism, compound psychological and political harms, related risk, inflicting harms to generations, humiliation with violent discrimination, diminished sovereignty, disregarding safeguarding memory, generating authority and cultural sovereignty unless indigenous people control the production possibility. For sovereignty appeals, bleak conservation of conquest. Fair use currently uses three factors to determine fair use: how transformative, commercial exploitation, and market value. The second factor on nature of work is left out. The 321 indigenous communities should indigenous people rely on copyright fair use permits the unauthorized use, which public interest outweighs holders' interest. Holder has the right to prevent others from reducing right is limited. Course focused on whether the work is transformative, commercial, non-profit, justice, economic value, amount, use, little attention to nature of the work, culture, works play a significant role determining appropriation. Work being copied, key sites of inquiry for adjudicating the issues. Appropriation for the relations of production, inquiring aesthetic form, and its intellectual value integral to nature inquiry. The second factor has been reduced to two distinctions: whether a work was published and whether it was factual. Neither have any relevance. Read 21. Neither distinction shed any highlight on whether the type of various factors Supreme Court recognized too. Whether the work is published, whether the work is creative or factual, whether the material is creative or factual, survived much longer. The court refined the factual nature assessment. Its precedent nature was of little consequence. As the second factor, increasing reliance on second other various factors, but does little to inform what aspects of nature foreclosed on right to use. Courts reduce to consideration binary question whether the appropriated work is creative or factual. Courts simply dismiss the second factor. It is so vague, courts cannot apply it. Totally inadequate for adjudicating cultural appropriation. Let's read 21. As groups assert their rights to creativity, current test will be little benefit to decide complex cultural appropriations and religious technology center. The district court struggle to identify the nature of church documents to reach opposite conclusions. Spiritual works left in appropriation limbo. Judges figure out the proximity to the court, copyright court. Ambivalence raises serious doubts that the cultural analysis could weigh the specific harms appropriation causes against public interest. Centering the second fair use factor to examine the ontological nature of work and impact appropriation on a creative environment, views of work within this network of relations, and rejects vague taxonomies that prevents unauthorized appropriation. Read 21. Second fair use factor should protect authorship, examine creative environment to understand expectations, analyze unauthorized use, impact incentives, weigh against fair use, requiring appropriation until to consult with communities to determine the work from an indigenous point of view, take the precautions to ensure to protect and comply with indigenous communities. Court assess whether or not it's useful to disrupt motivation, framing nature and ontological, examine the context, textual approach, privilege, European settler culture, ontological approach, examine relations, Google versus Oracle, indicate the movement towards such an approach, observing how work is generated, functions, and value. Privilege over appropriation allows us to see how work is valued. Copyright is key. Fair use must be amended to accommodate culture without falsely excluding indigenous products. It's incomprehensible to legal frameworks. It's 321. Current fair use be a little benefit. Judges' works are left in limbo and judges try to figure out proximity, generals that are factual. The second fair use factor all written out. Rehabilitating fair use that accomplishes settler colonial appropriation. Rehabilitation give nature to meaning indigenous works fit within copyright. Fair use fails to account for diversity. Copyright must involve indigenous people want access to copyright, engaging in structures that have previously disadvantaged them, allows protection and cultural survival. That's Barclay 97. Theft of cultural symbols represent valuable civilization. The art is fundamental to cultural identity. Those who strip it away have meanings. Each time heritage eyes a little with this people, indigenous groups have sought legal redress. Groups are willing to participate in Western IPR, whether they feel excluded. They authorize their use as license and collect royalties. They want copyright to take back culture. Some use IP to prevent cultural harm. Expropriation will cause imagery to lose original significance, lead to a dissolution of culture. Control over cultural practices and intellectual property is a necessity in a world where Western understandings dominate and co-opt Indigenous culture. Under the guise of globalization, that's mid-20. Mid-zero expansion, signal for exchange, colonization, end boundaries, understanding collapsing, Western understanding attitude become more dominant, increasing commodification of culture. Globalization means opening up new markets, provide access to cultural practices. Object is not only indigenous IP, but also the use of future indigenous societies. Oracle does not dump the app because it reiterated the factual creative distinction, but dumps every dislike link. That's 321 in Google versus Oracle because code was not intended to be innovated, court funded, not merit protection. The court fell back on factual creative distinction previously established. Just a plan. The United States federal government should strengthen protection of domestic intellectual property rights and copyright by mandating the second fair use factor. Examine the ontological nature of the work and potential impact of unauthorized appropriation on the creative environment. Finally, framing utilitarianism justifies exploitation of indigenous communities for Western gain. Rejected. Smith 87. Genocidal languages and consequences precede any conscious destroy indigenous peoples, which words extinction and utilitarian genocide become prominent in Americas, become pronounced indigenous peoples subject to genocidal attacks in the name of development. Some persons must die so that others can live well. Tends to be total. Extinction is an empty superlative. Forego improbable impacts and retrench humanity into Western frames that manifest colonial genocide. Mitchell 17. Extinction become an empty superlative. Gestures to abstract form of unthinkability. Exposure contributes to the formation of Western subjects. Extinction, fantasy, negation that expresses destruction, desires, extinction, non metaphor, white dominant discourse addresses Systematic destruction enacting moves to innocence have acts culpability perpetuate violence disproportionately affect groups inflicted to create space for aggressors aspect or colonial genocide treating extinction something short strengthens European understandings of your personhood which is active violence obscure entwined with racialized structures. Vote negative to prevent extinction is a settler fantasy further dispossession that's intimately intertwined with extermination. That's daily 16 settlers love to contemplate their own extinction unlikely to ever happen. Settler colonial narrative is shaped around the need to erase the native settler gaze imagine their demise research paradoxes founding ideology contemplate extinction offers settlers a chance to disavow the violence of their origins fears future narrative social death predicated on logical elimination draws energy from settler defensiveness fear of annihilation suppressed dissent illegitimate violence nearness or actual ideological mystification from good racial change creating settler moves innocence extinction as a core trope through settler futurity prioritize structural violence as a prerequisite to addressing other modes of destruction. Mitchell 17 structural violence involves systemic discrimination colonialism complex of violence each form is devastating significant causes of extinction intensify climate change or extinction to solution into governance destruction of knowledge history appropriation cultural genocide embody all destruction by killing indigenous communities embracing knowledge and violent responses leave violence intact and can add to their power the logic to the worst violence cause genocide and make extinction inevitable. That's Oliver 20. Within collateral damage containing suffering becomes an outlet for more suffering calculation based on arbitrary thresholds of death. The impossibility of predicting future risks is disavowed by calculation, creating illusion, mastery, and aim of preventing the worst violence, lessons to be few collateral war terror stats calculate with greater precision, reports casualties, destroys myth of precision. Even so, within logic forces can supposedly avoid diverse wars seen as a calculate. Outside an equation calculation, which is that outlet for warfare, every other is reduced to changeability when ethics and politics become adding a mechanic. We nurse the worst violence and rather avoided the worst evolves from pseudo nuclear war. Models that reduce life to units operate to a world destroying genocidal logic when the worst becomes possible, the lesser reveals life and death to reduce to calculation. The worst with nuclear war, even the destruction of the entire planet, the worst must remain outside change the possible condition for what is better or worse, the incalculable always intentional with what can be calculated. There's no common measure to persuade me that a personal warning is less grave than nuclear war when we think the area runs this slippery slope of util. That exclusionary line, according to genocide logic, system models and compute valuations, part of genocide logic that justify the worst. IP is repurposed towards indigenous knowledge protections. Anything else denies indigenous peoples as a valuable legal tool against appropriation. That's I did not see the author. Carpenter 04. Indigenous peoples' rights, ownership of specific properties. True that IP laws are based on Western concepts, creation, and ownership. Those laws are primary vehicle protection of works to segregate indigenous interests from this regime in light of globalization and commodification to deny a powerful legal shield and sword. It's essential that laws are not discarded but rather adapted to indigenous situations. Inclusion of cultural knowledge works within an intellectual property regime requires rewiring but does not diminish the value of the machine. Copyright laws in their current formulation are inadequate. Copyright law must be expanded to protect cultures. Only the AF decolonizes fair use while heeding the demands of marginalized groups, evaluating the infringement claims against cultural appropriators. Read 21. Cultural appropriation can compound experiences of other colonial violence while eroding sovereignty. Copyright law provides protection. Decolonized fair use doctrine serves cultural production and nature's reworking the interpretations fair use factor test. A decolonized second fair use factor would assess the work's function and value. Indigenous and other marginalized groups contemplate copyright infringement claims. Fair use undoubtedly plays a key role of success.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it mean to examine the ontological nature of work and the impacts of unintended appropriation?
So there's currently 4 fair use factors that determine whether a work that is reproduced or redistributed can be fair use. And the second factor is the ontological nature of work, so the AF. So right now we're saying that's vague in the status quo, which is causing appropriation and hurts indigenous communities.
How do you clarify that ontological nature?
Well, it gets the courts to actually start to examine it and consider it as a major factor in the process of fair use.
So what exactly does that look like? Does that look like the court's ruling on some sort of law? Is it Congress acting? Like, how does that play out?
Are you asking
like how is the plan implemented? Yeah.
The USFG examines the ontological nature of work.
But what does that mean?
Like, what do you mean, what does that mean?
That's
the fair use factor. They look at that. Like, right now we're saying that currently people do not actually use this factor to determine their decisions about whether fair use is applicable or not. And the AF makes it so that it is a factor when people are, when they're trying to decide what's fair use.
I guess, so what does it look like using that as a factor?
Yeah.
The ontological nature of the work literally means, in Reed's definition, to examine the work in the context of the networks that produce it, i.e. when we have fair use cases, like including those 4 factors, we would mandate that the courts have to consider and rule on the ontological nature of a work and its effect on its creative environment.
I guess, how do you determine what that ontological nature is?
Well, because it is very objective in how a work may function in its creative environment. Reed also says that this would include bringing like tribal members or whoever work was infringed upon to the table so they can describe it.
So multiple groups of indigenous people all work on the same, have all worked on things overlapping. How do you determine which tribal council gets to make the decision?
Well, it's not that question because this app is literally, the thing is already copyrighted. So there's already an owner for it that is established like in the original
So
copyright.
it's only things that are already copyrighted and owned by tribal councils?
Yeah.
Well, it could be owned by like
So
tribal
what
people.
about all
Well,
this
like, when things
indigenous
are
knowledge
copyrighted-
that gets
Well, okay,
infringed
so when
upon
things
that
are
isn't
copyrighted, you know who the owner is. So it's not like there's no conflicting interpretations.
So anything that isn't currently
And
copyrighted can
indigenous
still,
communities also don't make the decision. Like, I don't know what you're talking about there.
they don't make the decision.
Like,
so
they
they
own-
have to own
They
it,
can't settle the cases.
but they can weigh in on the cases.
Yeah, because now the app makes it so that you re-examine the second factor, which is key.
Okay, so they're doing the re-examination.
And we've said that they would rule in favor of indigenous
Yeah.
people
Okay.
as a result.
I guess there is like lots of property that is infringed upon or taken from indigenous people. If you've made this overarching claim that their goods are already being stolen in the status quo and solving that is necessary, how do you solve everything that's infringed upon?
Because they would bring it to the court.
Yeah.
But you said it has to exist. Okay. 8 minutes.
Is this tournament 8 or 10?
Let me check.
Wait, go
You
them
should,
out?
you should probably know.
Yeah. Wait, did you add me to the email
Oh,
chain?
shit. Yeah, my bad, sorry.
I've got it.
10 minutes in front.
Right. And
that
then
number
Rory.
Okay. And your,
Is that good?
I need to add it. Just go. Wait, where's the rest? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
9 minutes.
Ned.
Okay, I'm gonna send it right now.
Can you send it to the new one?
Yeah.
Uh,
I just
Rory.
replied to the email with the.
Oh, I did too. Yeah, so either one is fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's done. The order is 7 off the case. Has everyone received it?
No.
I did no doubt.
Just let me know when you're good.
Yeah.
Judges?
Give me 1 second. You said 7?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
Inmates words or phrases should be construed to mean they're a violation. App does not like the entire area of copyright for a long minute to exceed topic area exposed to topics county actions don't even change. The status quo, any net ground next all 5 year protections are statutory for and agency actions enforcement, no protection for policy whenever protection and protection. Enforcement relates to the statutes of the country's legislative subject interpretation, history, enforcement, application, discretion, and enforcement. At the agency's violation, they enforce, quote, neg, will, mistakes, but the topics include minute legal precedents, creating impossible research burden, second ground court action police. Court discuss like politics, actions specify their agency's key enough fairness to need to have stable links to distance on that by topic next off domestic legal claimants exclusively. Create protection within the United States, contemplate the primary contrast between domestic and international IP laws and domestic IP law applies. Just inside particular nationwide and national IP law across multiple countries. Violation of indigenous land is not in the U.S. legal. 18. Having Native American tribes treated as separate nation treaties were negotiated with very different tribe treaties and not signal to the appropriation signal with other countries. Native American tribes are regarded as partly fully part of the United States. That's bad for limits and ground interpretation exposed to topics to include international apps that overstretches the negative research burden undermines prepared Unfairness for all the base default to competing interpretation. Reasonability is arbitrary. And T is substance vote next. Off-settler colonialism is civil domination sustained through politics of recognition that accommodates indigenous legal claims to naturalize. Colonial hierarchies called by 14 problematized assumption colonial relationships between the indigenous peoples and the states to reconcile with the liberal politics of recognition-based approach to reconciling indigenous assertions of the nation of the settler state sovereignty via the combination of indigenous identity-related language, orientation, structure, committed for dispossession, primitive accumulation, every easy structure, capitalist, and the colonial logic, settler colonialism, territorial, acquisitive, perpetuate, colonial powers not. Its founder should strictly violent rather than the basis of colonialism in the liberal, democratic context as well as much of the productive character of colonial structure of the settler. Colonialism deriving its productive power from the ability to produce forms that have settler canoes continue hierarchies and natural canoe colonial functions play a recognition politics in maintaining the settler canoe relationship. IP is intrinsically settler colonial and built to co-opt indigenous knowledge in the name of protecting property. Vista Byron's 23, the information cooperates settler colonial systems that extract the knowledge from the marginalized communities. The central focus of liberty ignores the concerns about equality. The big pharma take indigenous knowledge transform tied even become the exclusive owner for that knowledge disagrees with the ideological belief that one system works for all black streams have strayed for their original purposes for indigenous peoples to have the knowledge that the ransacked. It's hard to see how the IP system ever worked or what decades of reformers attempt for inside IP law have accomplished. The system's not taking the work need for the reformers' work was designed for having the settler colonial structure and having the running out of magical times for waiting for public policies turn favorable colonial extractivism, unsustainable and locks in an endless cycle of suffering. Developed 24 extractions, grown modernists responsible for catastrophe, invention of the boats, and invention of the shipwreck colonial conquest, establishing means to exterminate via atomic bombs, and progress and neighbor people, normally so as and others, and only actions with the entire network of extractivism's major. Its destruction not event, hence sociological destruction normalized by the bombarding people subject to depreciation, extracted by underestimated accumulation of extractivists enables them to the processual concerns that maintain. Colonial mentality should have some destruction, not to alter the logic of elimination, constantly manifest in the everyday gradation of subjective modes of being defined. Settler identity, Rifkin 14, the settler college set call shift away from its effects implication on multiple attachments of basic structure, not event, elimination, organizing peace rather than law of occurrence and creative. Contains the structure, settler colonial society, position, structure, white subjectivity, colonization, representation, all the play through the ground, which U.S. set call an act of self-decolonization means a commitment to incommensurability. We have no obligation to answer to settler future, rather to radically reject their moves to innocence towards native self-determination, native futurity, attacking and co-ethic incommensurability, knowledge is decolonization, not obliged to answer to accountable to settlers or settler futurity, decolonization, accountable indigenous sovereignty, relinquishing the hope that one day settlers may be commensurate to native peoples removing conditional causes, colonization is not endless, elsewhere next off. The United States federal government should apply corrective taxes to cost of non-compliance remaining. The second fair use factor, examine the ontological nature of the work and potential impact of unauthorized appropriation on its creative environment. Substituting taxes creates identical effects results better by avoiding legal blowback. Rota 17, having regulatory taxes suitable, making decisions economic arguments to provide the regulation of economic conditions rather than classifying behavior illegal, allow the legislative regulating making the own decision regulation of tax laws and likely prohibitions, ensuring that the lower enforced regulation decreasing the risk of possibly the common price of the error will be significantly lower than prohibition. Using taxes as a new independent regulator to maintain some as an insurance broadly cushions societal responses to inevitable ecological, demographic, and political crises. Extinction matches 18. The climate, air pollution, resource depletion, biodiversity loss as of worldwide threats. Common responses will not provide the solution. Changes can be steered, but these have the existing instruments and new approaches. Potential taxation are not yet understood. Political crisis, demographic evolutions could lead to a replacement ending in equilibrium that can be more sustainably. Prohibitions are ending in the routines and policies discouraging practices play role. Taxation was examined as the main subject. There is no consensus to separate taxes. Scholars think a role in part is rarely part of comprehensive mix. Text off. IPR litigation is slow, expensive, and hostile. Lead 15 disputes arise from the divergence of interest dispute resolution. Too expensive, too slow, and too cumbersome with concern lead to varying use of mechanisms for ADR docket. Overload prevents efficient resolution to climate change. Index enforcement and climate policies to reduce climate change. Currently 21 judicial and leadership essential role in advancing the law on climate litigation, ensuring implementation, enforcement, and evolution of the guardians responsible for judiciary, maintaining integrity of the rule of warming. Cause extinction. NG19 when climate causes extinction due to non-linear cascading feedbacks, multiplicative factors and tipping points. C. The ice sheet collapse causes sea level rise, melting increases the warming. The release method producing runaway warming adaptability limit makes extinction likely. Next, all bias proposal to the peace in Gaza is almost zero focus on Philadelphia and the prisoner exchange compromises. Key Dina Al 97 having President can push away the deal proposal of Israel and Hamas with success come down to political will. 90% of the paragraphs agreed for the spending of the huge PC push. The conflict has become even more since the re-election. There's no real chance of ceasefire. The two primary issues are Philadelphia and the other prisoners. There's a zone of the agreement, and the problem is the PC Biden needs for urgency because of each day the risk of the war increases. The pressure points could lead to it could be used if they have are willing to try and negotiate, but maybe time for Biden is much better for non-PC for the U.S. while he's standing on a president's legislative achievements. Don't translate into wins, particularly on foreign policy. Also, 22 Carter doubled the park system for diversity, having ethics, civil service reforms as airlines and trucks to regulation of relationships with China, signed with environmental legislation, danger for Biden to follow. Carter's party is receiving little credit for the achievements voted blocking these victories. Carter and Biden suffered from the Green Lantern theory, has the self-accomplishments will prove. Challenging domestic fights, bog Biden down, distracting from diplomacy. Suing 723, the thing from preventing Israel from fresh offensive the U.S. Restrict rising tensions to the strong U.S. leadership situation demands to leave for the American wheels could not be higher. Lebanon defense depending for the tax that has followed the U.S. I have to prioritize international affairs, unchecked Middle East war goes nuclear. Perry 617 that in World War I, 20 million Israel down sent over the mails from Israel. And that Gaza has been a multi-long for prolonged attack escalation. Seems likely Iran has really complete destruction that's affected all the world powers. The question is what Russia and China both distraction making moves politics and the attack on for modern world wars clear all avoid on this end. Israel and Hamas advantage copyright can't solve, only benefits all indigenous people and outside actors continue to commodify Uruk. 22 most oral traditions cannot be original to cross-generational. They also mean that the non-indigenous parties enjoy copyright without very little input for them themselves. There's also great risk of the parties assuming oral traditions are in the public domain can be used by anyone. Documentation makes outside of the community become authors of the oral tradition specific. Representation of oral tradition would be protected by copyright, not be the only benefit to control outside of the community. Further increases distrust. Copyright alone is insufficient is not sufficient to stop the collection of outsiders by the community. Tradition copyright is more likely to be used against the community. Incorporating indigenous expression to IP is bad. First, it forces native authenticity casting. Kenny 11 the perils of mixed social propertization. There's so many dangers about hesitation under all other quantified difficulties arise in the quantified and native applying. For the standards to have concepts of spiritual and hybridated the culture overlap. Second, intertribal disputes that makes apps totally unworkable. Kenny 11 having it possible to come up with a coherent definition of indigenous groups of exhaustion cause review particularly sailing for the artifact of speak determining whether tribe has the artifact is RT system problems have already risen from active groups have an issue competing claim temporal disconnected magnified representation fanboy a moment of creation which have to be difficult to disagreements content are greater impediment difficulties amplified by the changes makes governments more likely to change position changes by future generations decisions present day representations that may not seem no different than Manhattan will have to the Baja use the shields renewal ceremonies you can want something more carefully for the generations. Do you want me to go to framing?
Yeah.
Framing consequences from first Bob Brett 18 some catastrophes are more important than the others. Many will go to the possible generation of 100 trillion last May. We underestimate risk equal to the probability times magnitude decided should have 500 trillion times harder to prevent goal protection to save. A person's life, everyone has the right to their own views and strongest argument for the right legal position. All humans' lives should be valued equally. The veil of ignorance blocking speak which have considered society irrespective of each member, then may be valuing everyone equally suggests a very high value of reducing GCR extinction. First GPP 17 comparing a war that kills 99% war because 100% difference between 2 or 3 much greater existence capacity choice the future flourishing in the way how the value flight affects the risk global public and intergenerational good cognitive biases lead people underestimate risk or not feeling scope that people become numb to when the numbers get too large decision making that excess is risk less severe by many orders of magnitude. The butterfly effect pales in comparison makes extinction that cost 17 mistake to allocate the resources in direct approaches whenever extinction is looming. Indirect measures having the least to prevent calls to arm appropriate when facing the apocalypse abandon indirect approaches when the circumstances demand it. And which for cross.
Status.
Conditional.
Okay. Net benefits.
The taxes counterclaim is internal.
Okay. And A-spec was on courts, right?
It was on T courts.
Yeah. Okay. The Biden dissent. What part have you read that says the plan causes domestic violence?
Yeah, the alter card is pretty good on this. It talks about anything that looks like, quote, a legislative win, i.e. anything that gets passed by Biden seems to distract him from his initiatives within Gaza. We think that this link is based off of focus.
So Biden literally doing anything just distracts him?
No, we think him passing legislation. The alter card is pretty good at this. It says, it talks about trucking deregulation, airline, normalized relationships with China, environmental legislation. All of these can be the tipping point for Biden.
Okay, where does they say that it trades off with the ceasefire?
That's our internal link card. The Soling evidence is really, really predictive for this. It talks about how any disputes for Biden, if he uses his PC on this, that means that
you just said that you don't have a card saying that the plan causes disputes. You just read a
Well,
card saying when he passes something, it distracts him.
Okay,
and your internal link
could-
card is about domestic fights.
Yes.
So
what about that?
I'm confused because they're not.
Yeah, we would read more cards.
As of the 1 and C.
As of the 1 and C, we think we made the broad central claim that passing litigation would be net
but
bad
you're-
for Biden's PC. Therefore,
yeah,
we wouldn't be able to
Okay,
respond.
so
to
passing
conflict.
legislation distracts him.
Yes.
Internal link is
This
somehow that causes a bunch of fights, even though you didn't read a card about the plan causing fights.
No, an increase in Biden passing the litigation would expend his PC. It would result in a net decrease. The end of the link card talks about
Why
how
would
this
he?
would
Why
cause
would it?
fighting.
Why would it expend his PC if you didn't read a card saying that the plan is not popular or something like that?
What?
Like you didn't read a card saying the plan causes fights. The plan causes PC.
But we read the link on the level that passing legislation would be net bad because it would derail our focus to the war in Gaza.
Okay. Did you skip any cards on case?
Yeah, I did.
Which ones?
The last Kenny card, and then the 2 cards below that.
Okay. The Sekolke
Yes.
is the alternative fiated.
Yeah.
Can you kick it?
No.
Okay.
We can kick it, if we don't go for the K.
Yeah, that's what
gotcha.
it means, yeah.
Is it fiated internationally?
No.
No. Okay. The taxes counterplan. How does using taxes as a new tool combat every existential threat?
That our Bachelor's card is pretty good at talking about how taxes as a means of consequences rather than like the implementation.
Yeah,
of
but
the
how does it stop
act.
things like climate change, pollution?
What?
One second. And you only read the last framing part.
We read all of it.
Oh. You dropped it. You dropped it from the AC.
Say yes.
Okay. Wait, stop. 8:26. Got marked absent.
Before you send it, can I
Yeah,
use
I
the
got marked
restroom?
absent. Just got marked absent from school.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wait, I'm gonna reply to Cindy Reeves.
yeah. Missing school is like.
No, but
Am I
like,
missing?
huh?
Huh?
What?
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 Are you missing 3 days?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our school doesn't recognize due dates as excused absences.
Oh, so you have unexcused?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So how do you?
Right.
We just kind of tank it. The last got a bunch of like letters where it was like we're gonna send you to like Saturday school if you keep bitching or whatever.
That's horrible.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
They're the ghosts though, so they have calls run.
Just show them like the Peninsula Instagram page.
Well, I was gonna say, like,
It's sad.
Peninsula, as a lot of people on the team, has like, one of the best
You know, it's
schools.
weird. Like you would assume that we'd have way more institutional support, but we don't get like any funding from the school. I guess probably because it's public, so they really only fund like
No,
should they like.
the school's
AB,
big
what-
programs.
Why is that?
Amy, what class are you teaching this year?
I teach U.S. history and current events. right now.
AP or
What's
not?
the
AP or not?
No. Right
what's the big current event right now?
Probably the election.
I don't know what I'm gonna do whenever there's not an election happening next year. That's all I know. Like,
I have to present current event on Greece next week.
on Greece.
Yeah.
We haven't gone international yet, but I would like to soon. What's happening in Greece?
I don't know. Yeah. I have to do the assignment next week. Yeah, I was trying to get Russia, but third choice Greece.
Tough.
Yeah, I know.
30%.
Let me just. Oh, you just.
Do it. I'll close the door. Move your stands. Legs.
Yeah.
Here.
So 8.
324.
324.
8. 8. Okay, order. Appropriation. Framing. T subsets. T enforcement. With a spec answered there. Domestic, T domestic. The second pay. The taxes counterplan. The court clog decide. And the election or Biden decide.
Just get the order of the flows again.
The T flows, yeah. T subsets, the N means throughout. T enforcement. And I'll answer A spec on there, and then T domestic.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Cultural appropriation compounds psychological, social, and political harms upon indigenous communities, perpetuating a violent history of settler dispossession that diminishes tribal agency and sovereignty while ignoring urgent demands for legal rights. So one is able with convocation assumes the status quo indigenous people would say their copyright was infringed upon and apply for fair use so outsiders cannot use it. Bolton proves that's the read evidence, and they say authenticity testing the app doesn't require distinction on who is native. It's about creative environment broadly, and it's about and all people can apply for it. They say tribal councils, not our app. We don't devolve authority, we only embed a fair use in the instance someone is infringed. Frame it. Extinction does no way. First, impossible. Any approach or probability with the magnitude is insanely high makes decision-making impossible. Second is erasure. The calculation for the greatest number always sacrifices indigenous and minority groups. That Smith, Mitchell, and Oliver. Third is constructive fallacy, overcorrect for normative bias, and that two events is more likely than one results in worse forms of scenario planning and advocacy force research. Creates a race to the bottom to only read extinction. If they say intrinsic bad assumes extinction, internal links are true will disprove them. And their process of calculation and conceits process to extinction is bad. That's the app and Oliver, which they dropped. They say cognitive bias first. It's non-unique. Their framing fosters seller solidarity and suppresses indigenous populations most at risk of extermination. Error app that's Dally. Second is no inflation. Extinction evokes a fantasy of negation that papers over violence sets. Use perverse imagination to inflate probability, calculative probability, and the multiplication of the internal like at Smith and Mitchell. They say butterfly effect, no butterfly effect. Link chains aren't random and reasonable prediction. Self-coincidentism isn't to predict the future, but to establish the most likely link chain to determine how we should evaluate things. T subsets. We meet first plain text in a vacuum, least arbitrary, singular. Second is functionally the app affects all of fair use and copyright. Second, counter-interpretation in subsets. KC19 and within the about the bit does not require complete inside. Third, predictability. Our definition has intention to find and exclude within IPB's app ground facets of the topic generate core advantage ground. See if only limits matter. Counter-interpreters or app solve limits often for functional limits. 3 generous patents bad. Copyright bad. Elections politics advantage. Counterplans core clock cap. Sufficiently soft. E reasonability competing interpretation causes race at the bottom and subsets. Ground T enforcement. We mean functionally the app can be progress. We expand the scope of copyright fair use. We don't enforce. They've not read a true violation. Enforcement is a part of protection. Type code 6 intellectual property right protection or legal protection enforcement. 5 euro counter-interpretation can be both statutory and enforcement protection. The Ostergaard concept of intellectual property right protection measure my APR mostly court statute and enforcement code and for an ASAP ground forces every app to be about subject matter rule making street generous and courts unbeatable means predictability. Ostergaard has clear intent to define strengthening protection and measurement. 4 functional limits that was above. Agent specification worthy USFT. Further specification lacks a resolutional basis which is unpredictable, arbitrary, and leads to agent contemplates a descent or research. Worst case defaults to reasonability. They to the bottom, they see T subset. That's obviously not true with this argument. No warrants. Drop it. T domestic. We mean the app amends federal copyright law. Tribes can opt in to use it. Does not directly do it on tribal lands. Counter-interpreted domestic means legal in geographical jurisdiction. U.S. code. NT domestic means in the United States under law. U.S. counter-interpretation domestic relates to the origin country. Webster 24 domestic active relation within a country prefer predictability with sex code is in plain usage. They don't have intent to define or exclude. After every IP protected product is sold on international markets or affects internationally, they mangle the literature. K. Framework only evaluate plain desirability that entails weighing the case and having links to the plan fiat implication preferred and preventable critiques decimate fairness and clash. The framing issue for the links for the non-unique inevitable IP exists in the status quo. There are other capitals and institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Second, the app doesn't run contrary to the all that only codifies the status quo. Permutation to both ideal overcomes the links or can't solve all fails devolves into public domain, which continues settler colonialism through conquest of indigenous culture and assimilative logics. The turns K that's read or permutation to the app and give back the land. That is what Tucking are advocating for, but it's not mutually exclusive with the app. But if they fiat it, that's a voter. Private actor and international fiat destroys debate. There are billions of possible actors justifies object fiat and obliterates is both fairness and clash project ontology. Indigenous people seek redress from copyright deriving the access as dispossessive and terms of case. That's the partly evidence, and they've dropped topic uniqueness of one sees a reason why we are poised to talk about current indigenous movements reclaiming culture within copyright. It's paternalist to prescribe current efforts as futile because the gratuitous racist structure exists that creates a pessimism trap which turns decay and a stifled activism. Like for 20, colonialism is not this movement limits indigenous active individual organizations or the human rights area there because they were told that below they had to prove track by the deliberately chose rights for mental business and overlooks indigenous agency authenticity versus co-option desire to colonize to be engagement with the status food updated to interest sovereign traps inhibiting engaged opportunity with colors to the romantic disturbance to indigenous resistance condemning it with a safe focused improved relationship to itself to be community to declarations of ground affirm indigenous right indigenous organization were drafted in the declaration raised the organization continue their advocacy are not going to implement change on the required negotiation process require engagement to read radical change requires critical thinking creative thinking and careful diplomacy and optimistic vivid black and executed efforts are called to create unnecessary negative feeling division of permutation. The law is key that answers our first link demands carbon or read can be repurposed for the purpose of indigenous people and we should not discard the machine that's a carbon evidence. Second is on you need the recognition link indigenous peoples are already using federal copyright system that's the one you see indigenous laws already incorporating they're calling the federal government to adopt a similar stance. Kenny 11 indigenous communities are passing on their own less simple pressure to national courts to adopt similar states at the Hobie Kilby interest all published on public field interviewing the Hobie Apache of demanding exclusive defending the power of control over Apache cultural poverty indigenous lives are the front lines of intellectual poverty they don't exist human such a copyright demand is and conditionality is the voting issue time and strategy skill the block if they can advantage is not reciprocal they can kick arguments and we can't help multiple plans promotes argument irresponsibility just solves our office taxes perm to bills shields every deficit low tensions and regulation given different regulatory approach and medical maximum optimal regulatory regime would include CNC preservative best estimate residual risk harm likely to cause restricted liability for actual harm costs with offset tax already paid and criminal responsibility coordinates over determines the minimized cost can perm to the app and apply taxes as an optional cost for non-compliance that deals because it does not tax as much as the expected from second perm to the counterplan can't solve A its proactivity doesn't amend the app so the counterplan can't prove non-compliance B's costs even unlimited resources is impossible to constantly monitor infringement C's risk aversion must over 15 regulation high rivers have the authority to apply Victoria tax a little incentive to experiment prefer trying to method because long is tendency for path more advantage understanding hiding tendency these administrative problems must over 15 pico administration cannot calculate optimal tax and efficient based on a certain uniform cost when social costs various forms from other issue counterplans once he technically functionally committed maximizes German compared to African objectivity gather can you send the text permutation to the avenue jobs our carbon taxes is what their solvency advocate is implementing so it is functionally competitive court log. Drop the only see thumper from Oracle means both stats or thumbs. It's 0 to go for in the 200. The non-unique courts are backloaded now. Hernandez 24. Courts are working to clear backloads. Pandemic courts delay hurdles including funding vacancy shortages. Delay pandemic 1. Work collecting tables or criminal and no link. The court 0 says litigation comes from the pen. In fact, they didn't even read one. Link currently courts can't classify cultural works due to failed taxonomy, leaving them in appropriation limbo. That's the read evidence. No internal link, no spillover. Established document control works. Surrender 20. Open the floodgates to overlap any empirical civil courts verdict deal and deluge. However, evidence has CS2 boomers to the rule and procedure 7 times. Doctrine consider research such a claim preclusion, issue preclusion, absentation, rejoinder, and case uniqueness concedes that in litigation is too expensive, makes clog less likely spillover claim, which is empirically denied. They also didn't read it, a link to the app, and the second factor is insignificant. That's a read evidence, but the app analysis helps simplify litigation. On the other forms, consider court struggle understanding various factors to create a more confusion and consider the application to second participate. Confusion surrounding surrounding court orders with efficiency to ceiling and concept to descendant of surrounding focus code on always is surrounding the other facts of these missing the second factor workers. Analysis key to unlocking pillars that play fair use on top of the use and inference that resonates throughout now the impact of minuscule amount of climate cases are decided that towards larger reform like banning, fracking, international cooperation are needed, no climate impact. Bugman 23. Science remains unsettled, failure to climate to conform protection, high temperatures, no more common today than 1009 human influence have a constituted 6 degrees impact. When you hardly catastrophe climate threat, suddenly refuse the evidence of the existential process are always unreliable, warming is too mild. The climate constant dangerous weather is deaths have declined 99%, reefs are not threatening, ice sheet destroying sea levels, but at a slower rate, oceans remain markedly alkaline, roomies have doubtful evidence species, direct seeing elections is dead. October surprises in a litany of Hawthorne drown out the signal of the plan, and up to the make uniqueness a mood, brands 8-7. October surprises regional to through the riches of countries that ugly possibility major escalation of well-being is reborn because has full dwarf gods to become the regional eruption such a war plan to the trumps over their org. Weak democratic leadership produces a world of enthusiasm, threatening to depress democratic coalition like young voters, progressive people of color, and Republicans presidentially. In Michigan, reinsurance Israel shaped wedge in the Democratic coalition. Elsewhere, emerging is trying to be dissuaded to another term crisis. Inflaming issue their human immigration, economic migration, strong predators. New teams that the EU is supposed to do maritime sanctions on the oil terminal and energy markets and domestic economy and who these shooting at shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden and Sean U.S. their ramps are center they could only grow more likely to hear to herd administration Russian chief gain amplified Trump charges that current information elections strategy the plan pushed by activists and lobbyists groups between Biden is not brand that read and farly a logical policymaker could do both. A same actor has to keep reciprocity and logic and no link. The second factor is irrelevant. Ceasefire shaky at best. Ignore 768. Alarm loud that closer you get to see and moral disputes or that to be happening now. Pressure is granted to be rich people who go to the court chief of government. I haven't heard an explanation of who will enforce security in Gaza. That's a question of military presence. Israel now wants to check Palestinians moving north and go to Europe frankly use troops in Gaza and not charges against or failure or big.
Okay. Are you? Yeah.
Mr. Jack the team where condo and fielding are all right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go to the authenticity testing answer. You say it doesn't require a distinction of like if someone's native or not. How do you ensure that settlers don't just copyright and say like this is my product and take it from native communities?
What? No. The argument is that a lot of these works are already copyrighted. There is a person who has already applied for copyright, so we know who has ownership of the copyright. The
Wait, but what if the person who already applied for copyright was a settler?
It still applies. The argument is that this would apply mostly to indigenous cases because their works, a lot of their works hold tribal significance or really large
That
significance
still
in their
doesn't
creative
answer my
environment.
question. If a settler tries to copyright indigenous knowledge and they say it's theirs, how do you ensure that this doesn't happen if we don't do
Okay,
authenticity
first of all,
testing?
that is the status quo. Settlers are already trying to copyright
Wait, so how do you
indigenous
solve
knowledge.
any of the impacts within your
The
advantage?
argument is that indigenous people can apply for fair use if settlers have tried to appropriate their work or their
Well, how do you
copyright.
know if a settler was trying to appropriate their work?
Okay, no. This doesn't matter. The app is about the creative environment. So
Okay.
if it affects an indigenous person's environment, that indigenous person would say, this work holds significance to our community. Here are XYZ reasons. Here's an
Okay,
example of
thank
this.
you.
It does not require authenticity testing on who is more native than another person.
Okay, I want to go to the set call K. You say that the alt fails because it devolves into the public domain. How would material decall devolve into the public domain?
Well, if it still allows people to infringe on indigenous copyright
But it wouldn't
or
if
allow
we-
appropriation, then the alternative would look like a public domain. Obviously, you could say otherwise, but if it does not do the app, then it doesn't solve the app.
Wait, so if we fiat people get off the land, how does that not solve for cultural appropriation?
Well, again, people can infringe on copyright from outside of the United States. Unless you have applied
Wait,
legal protection for indigenous tribes' copyright, then you cannot solve the effect of appropriation on copyright.
If people will infringe on copyright outside of the United States, your plan is domestic, how do you solve for any of the alt causes that
Again.
you just gave us?
Again, the app is the only step in that direction. The
How is-
alternative does not resolve the legal harms that we've isolated, which means that if it does not do the app, it fails to solve the harms of the
not
app.
resolve the legal harms? What?
Again, we've said that copyright protections are needed to protect these traditions.
Okay.
If the alternative does not do that, then it does not solve that specific instance
Why
of
would
appropriation.
copyright be better to protect traditions than making settlers go off all the land and they therefore wouldn't
Again, okay,
infringe upon the
if it's a
tradition?
question of that, I do not understand why the permutation is best because it allows indigenous people to use the legal machine if they
Okay,
want to,
just a question
and
of
have
the-
settlers not involved in it.
Okay. The reject ontology, the Farley piece of evidence, what do you mean by indigenous people seek redress from copyright?
Indigenous movements in the status quo have adopted not only their own IP regimes and have called on the federal government to expand copyright, but also are, moving to protect copyright.
Okay. 9 minutes.
I'm gonna have time for this with coffee.
I also, Grace, this has all the Yeah. I read it, I didn't read the part.
But you said the last
Yeah.
one. Like the one that you haven't said.
can read this. You can read both, actually. Yeah, some of this is truthful.
No.
Yeah, some of this is not.
Order's going to be T subsets, the court clock dissad, the politics dissad, the K, advantage 1, and then, or the advantage, and then something.
Great.
Wait, can I have that?
Yeah, I'm attaching it right now, so. Okay.
It's freezing.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to crank it up a little?
I mean, I turned it up 2 more. Would people be
Oh.
mad if I turned it up?
Well, it's 65.
It's at 65 right now, which is like
this is
wicked
criminal,
cold.
so I'm gonna feel like a crisp
I
70 more.
appreciate that. I'm glad that it's not there for
Yeah, I
making it
keep-
too warm for people.
I keep my apartment at like 76 or something.
Yeah, no, I'll sleep in a comfortable 65, but I'm not looking to judge it.
I freeze in 72.
Yeah, I can crank it up even more. This is,
But I don't know. I'm wearing this, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, I saw my, app in the morning. It was going to be 100 degrees in Texas, so I was like, okay, I should wear some shorts.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I'm ready whenever I'm done.
I already got it.
I know. I just.
The stand feels extremely shaky on this leg, and I don't want my computer to fall. Okay.
Did you decorate those legs on it yourself?
Oh, no, this is Josh's.
Okay.
Yeah, and he has a bunch of stickers.
It's very cute.
And thank you. Everyone's good?
Let Josh know I like his style.
I will let him know. Is everyone good? Okay.
Top collapse must affect the entire top area. The words and phrases say Tracy 1 plan to extend effective is a bad standard. 1 F code would let's eventually kick advantages of solvency, removing the only predictable thing we can negate. 2 caution incentivizes teams. Treat appointments as 2 topical action, which means they never research potential mechanisms. Instead, hold them to their solvency of a cross-6. They underline F and answer cross-6 questions strategically to communicate specifics to a judge. Tracy 2 they do not meet. They violate because they cause a small subset of copyright to be protected because it's only works that are made by indigenous people. Tracy 3 the counter interprets words for limits in education on a topic with no topic to use or counterpenses decreases education because teams resort to process counterpenses to solve tiny F's that create stale debates that don't test the core controversy of the resolution. Tracy 4 predictability is a non-starter. 1 link turn where the phrases is the strongest definition in the Goldman defense in as a specifically equal term of our 2 sliding scale predictability is in the yes no question but a question of internal links so they must win a large 1-3 community norms solve the issue with predictable to 2 Tracy 5 no Afghan lost 1 structural advantage
just like infinite personalized, we should have choice made that means that app will always find new strategies to try to maintain engagement on a topic without core generics. 2, predict debatability for even if they're more predictable from the best one for debate. 3, we don't take ground any trademark, copyright, or patents out that affects the entire area, such as increasing the duration or strength of protection. Still allows them to read their advantages, but gives us stable GA links and counterplaying competition to easy. 5, they do not solve them if they allow for tiny apps that increase protection of any small area of property like biotech computer programs or types of machines, and we need a DA to everyone to see. 6, no functional limits. They don't exist. They can expand copyright to a tiny area. The only way to create predictable ground is with a stable app mechanism, which only our interpreter in the area of copyright provides. They say reasonability, but for competing interps objectively compares models which is pure ignores or reasonability. The alternative is judging intervention based on arbitrary predispositions, even if they aren't reasonable, which was about to go to the core club to set. The courts are managing their loads now, but the plan causes a flood of patents that cause the federal circuit and prevents litigation necessary to solve climate. That's Carlin. Climate change causes cascading effects that culminate in extinction. That's a rapid sea level rise, floods, communities melting ice, causes positive feedback loops that heat the earth until no life can be sustained. It outweighs more probability. If the climate is destroyed, we can't go through the breathe air. There is not a human life that could survive in 2 magnitude. No more oxygen guarantees every human on the face of the earth suffocates 3 times or more. About to hit the tipping point, which triggers positive feedback loops that make extinction inevitable, and only core-driven sustainability solves. Turns the case because climate change impacts marginalized communities, so indigenous communities would be hit first. We see 1, the number does not matter. It's about the plan that changes a different fair use doctrine. Changing this fair use doctrine would increase cases because if more people don't prosecute infringement post-plan, that takes out sovereignty because there's no increased protection of indigenous copyright. 2, they say non-unique, but the Hernandez evidence is about immigration courts in Georgia and not descriptive of entire U.S. federal court. The Senate is passing a bill to increase judges to meet their current caseload, OSF 9-2. Bipartisan litigation, if you reduce federal court wait times, has passed the Senate. The Judges Act passed the Senate to add new judgeships. The court would add 2 new judgeships. These were requested by conference. That's why we passed this bill. But next is the link debate. Increasing IPR litigation takes a long time. That's the lead evidence. Disputes are expensive and slow. They would cause an increase in disputes because 1 EC Reed says that increase in going after settlers who infringe our key copyright litigation is time and resource consuming. It fights a trade-off with the judicial functioning in other areas. Right, Church 17. A copyright infringement case has a median time of 25 months. Copyright can get put on the back. Gets put on the back burner if decision can't be reached. Things universal litigating copyright protections has massive discovery costs. Heinbachel 14. Suing on an individual basis is inefficient and extensive. From suing distributors made enforcing copyright prohibited by suing individual holders, confront end users suing infringers in large groups to reduce costs by concentrating fees and expenses related due to discovery. Next, they say that the courts can't solve, but the courts are key action for climate solutions. Carlin 21. Amidst the cavern of state failures, citizens have no last opportunity to vindicate the core rights of the judiciary. The question we should be asking is not whether the courts have a role to play in resolving legal disputes. They have, and they will. This is the role that the courts are designed to play. They say that the app's analysis causes simplicity, but it doesn't matter if there's simplicity if there's an increase of courts. That was the whole link debate. They say that there's small climate action in the courts, but that was answered above. And climate change does cause extinction. I did that at the top, but you should prefer an unbiased evidence who is on the advisory board of the Global Priorities Institute at Oxford University and studies climate change and analyzes which threats are a priority. They're too easy. Buckman evidence is so biased and written by a colonel in the Air Force who is writing here to try and convince the government to send more money to weapons. So of course he would say their policy should deprioritize other issues like climate. He gets paid to be persuasive. Go to the politics here. Concede the ceasefire won't happen. It takes out the offense because the impact is inevitable. Go to the K. I'm just answering condo, so you can go to the bottom. Condo is good. We get what we did. 1 night flex structural F, ice, fake plants, and making the 1 year arc after choosing the starting point in infinite perpetuity, testing multiple angles is best for education. The logical policy maker would not be forced to vote for an option less desirable than another. 4 critical thinking awards. Smart 2, see construction and efficiency. 5 fallback, having fallback allows innovation. But air negative 1, inevitable speed. Spell shells and theory 2, checks out on street turns perms. Suppose bad 1, contests there is 1, 2 cancel of next tricks. Force perms with theory and the 2 EC dictates block 3, just and you have justify infinite condo in our voter cultures, generics, killing clash games, strategy and shoddy research, killing education, logic, pre-rounds, disclosure, self-centered, their offense, our worst, reject the argument, not the team, quickly, go to the taxes counter plan, and go to the taxes counter plan, concede the firm just assess of competition, not going for it, go to case. Copyright cannot solve. There's a huge framing issue coming out of 1AC Crossix that proves that there is no solvency for the app because 1AC Crossix was clear that they don't allow an increase in actual copyrights and it's only changing standards that they look to as the ones in the status quo. 1AC Reed says that the issue is colonial infringement upon indigenous works that are not copyrighted. Changing the fair use standard does not increase copyright, so the impact is inevitable. that they don't disallow anyone to apply, but the applications would still be subject to authenticity testing, which proves that it takes out the app, but it includes native contributions and places too much power on tribal councils instead of individual artists. County 11. Intellectual property rights decreases expression, engaging in rent transfers to a concentrated group, discouraging individuals who have legitimate rights to produce individual indigenous artists are restricted, which forces them to seek a pre-clearance. Some do not receive clearance and find it harder to produce. Tribal councils will weaponize the plan to deny licensing or fair use. The impact to citizen banishment worsen. 8. Fair use does not provide proper protection for TCs for certain indigenous people. Any revelation to outsiders is punishable. A professor in New Mexico has been banished from Taos Pueblo for writing about a tribal dance order of banishment states. He calls it irreparable harm to and a sensible nature of the religious activity through exploitation. Go to the framing contention. Existential risk outweighs the GPP. Evidence is clear that as long as we're running any reasonable risk of a dissent, there's no mathematical way for a case to outweigh the two easy vaguely gestures to the idea that our impact framing causes bad outcomes, but one that's not unique. Anyone could co-opt any moral philosophy to justify bad outcomes, but requiring evidence for impact scenario solved. 2 is wrong. Risk-minded people are the most compassionate people because they care about people they will never meet. The death of billions of people would be the worst moral calamity in history and completely turns the case because it causes death of all indigenous people. And so if we win a risk of climate, we win impact. Yeah.
Okay, are you good? Okay, are you good?
Yeah.
Let's start on the court clog dissad. This
Yeah.
evidence about how courts are key to climate change. Where do you think this indicates that it solves all of climate change?
The Carlin evidence is pretty clear. You've read an analytic that says that we need to ban fossil fuels, but the Carlin evidence says that we'd actually be able to solve for the harms of fossil fuels by passing new innovations.
Solve for the harms of fossil fuels. I'm asking for an example of how court patent law or anything like that might resolve it that has been in your evidence.
Well, it talks about innovations, specifically green innovations, so CCS, any sort of renewable energies.
I guess my question is those green innovations, what method have you read that says that those green innovations will displace current fossil fuel technologies or will be cheap enough to replace?
Well, it doesn't matter if they replace them because if
Why?
there's innovations in CCS.
Okay, my second
that
question
would suck
is
the
that
carbon out of there
the
from the
2EC made a
fossil
claim
fuels.
about international follow-on. You've not read a card for it. Where do you think that countries like China, who produce the most coal, will follow on to green innovation?
Yeah, so I think that was answered on the Carlin evidence, the fact that courts would cause innovations that even if we don't completely transition away from green or from fossil fuels, there would be energy innovation,
Okay.
like CCS.
I'm looking at the
which
Carlin
would-
evidence right now. It doesn't mention the word climate change. It just says that we should believe in the courts. Where do you think this indicates that belief in the courts means that they'll do something?
Yeah, so the Carlin evidence from the 1NC as well is super specific about how the courts are necessary to pass through innovations that like CCS that sucks fossil fuels out of the air, which I think is the answer to the fact that
Okay,
other
the Carlin
countries
evidence from the 1NC is the rule of the judiciary is to enforce rule of law. Where is this about climate change other than the fact that it could influence climate change in some way?
So it specifically talks about passing cases that solve for innovation.
Okay, I have another question.
Yeah.
These links, the first one I want to talk about is the Zerker evidence about copyright litigation being time-consuming. Why do you think this is a link to the AF?
Yeah, so the cases that would pass through the court as a result of your AF would take a lot
what
of time.
cases would pass through the court? You have not read evidence about that?
I mean, your structural claim is that people have to prosecute those who are infringing on the copyrights of
And you think
indigenous
that is a
creative
bad
products.
idea?
I never said that was a bad idea. I said
Well,
that
you
that
seem
would,
to indicate that.
No, I said that would cause an influx of cases that would clog the court.
So we should risk a small risk that courts solve climate change for all indigenous people suffering dispossession of their culture?
I mean, I think that if we prove that warming turns indigenous violence and that it actually makes suffering worse for indigenous people, we should prioritize.
Okay, then I guess my question is, if courts pass this law now, when do you think these climate court cases will take effect?
Pretty
You've not read uniqueness evidence about the effects.
Okay. I'm sending it right now, but I have the circle, when it's loading. So, I hope
Let me,
it works.
because this one's broken.
Okay.
Didn't even notice that.
I haven't moved here.
Has everyone gotten it?
No. Give me 1 second. Wait, no, I'm opening up the one of the 2 and see.
Is everyone good?
No, I
Oh,
haven't
sorry,
got it.
sorry.
No, you're good, sorry. I'm good.
Everyone good? The world is structured by the ontological authorization of native peoples in which state efforts of clearing activity from total island is replicated in the protection of insular property that extracts resources from native communities to further the power of settlers into ways and search that various incorporates key to solve crisis, which identifies what perpetually racialized lines through class antagonists, fully decolonization can solve after if into one internal counter interpretation to judge. It's an ethical critic in the one AC knowledgeable of research prefer one that creates a better interlinked education, which outweighs fairness complaints about infinite reps are hilarious because A have choice means that they should be able to defend every part of the 1AC. B let's accept the reps since we still have to provide a link to what's contained in the 1AC. There's no link differential given they've been reading the same impacts from the CGR and all themselves topics. The outworks is their repetition compulsion to set their defense. As the USFG means that this might be the benevolent actor ignores history suggests that bonds in the hopes maybe this day they'll get it right in one day. Save the world, which one in C. Rifkin proves is rhetorical externalization of their individual hopes that one day they can escape the bonds intrinsic to being a settler. E knows to his argument to specify what wouldn't meet their interpretation, which means that you should give the tuner substantial leeway in response to 1AR clarifications. They say fairness A, per predictability resolves fairness. E look good bad. So the oldest, most research philosophical debates. B side bias, no less that you still have to prep advantages and choose a topic. C structural fairness, experience and speed, experience and camp. All proof fairness is not the primary motivation for the activity. They say clash fairness and internal and weak impact are actually fairness. Even if you think framework ideas support the idea of progress in general, they should be forced to prove by the action this plan. The plan is progressive and light. Our links to C2 is the link. I'm going to move the answer to the recognition link here for better organization. The links are not. They say links are not unique to what the plan is that works for the indigenous communities. The Kenny card is wrong. Indigenous law incorporating copyright statutes isn't the same as the U.S. developing completely new IPR for indigenous knowledge. Kenny isn't predictive, just as that the U.S. hopes to build indigenous copyright systems in the status quo, but the app is not passive giving of rights, but assimilation coaches in the language of mutual recognition. Coulthard 14, the self-determination efforts of indigenous peoples have increasingly been cast in the language of the recognition. These all recognition seen in the establishment of indigenous rights and regimes not being recognized the political autonomy of researchers. Having the settler of states can now ease on the perceived application for affirmative recognition, institutional accommodation, the freedom of autonomy, marginalized individuals, federal Indian policy has now apologetic assimilation was now push with the vernacular of the mutual recognition push. Instead, the ocean of the area coexistence around for the ideal of reciprocity in the politics of recognition promises of reproduced colonial states of indigenous people's demands have historically sought to transcend. But our link isn't just about recognition. They dropped the other links to the app, like subjugating natives through the system of the USFG, Rifkin 9 naturalized people are present as already happening to place within the national states. These identities enact an extension of the state authority to process of imperial interpretation, reorganize existing political economies, and naturalized use economy of assimilation of voice. It's crucial to erase their competing geographies, but their framing cards are a double term with the app, and our links in it with themselves. Our authors concede that decolonization is the only way to solve for indigenous suffering, intentionally choosing not to hide as part of the partisans and natives and their explicit demands. We read Pink versus when I say original settlers have the cultures, the bonds, and the metaphorical extraction things used to reward decolonization and strength the land, empowers indigenous in the lands, and these have addressing through direct decolonization, including dismantling settlements and structure the bonds and insurgents of the indigenous world. Again, they do it in 1AC Dali, that is a we read Pink in the mind grab, consider extinction functions the metaphor of decolonization. Next, and the links are inevitable themselves. That will be done on the all debate below, but they say perm first framework takes out the perm, the judgments of ideology before the claim, which means that the alt rejection of considerations mutually exclusive to no solvency. The perm allows for settler ideology to persist into the decol process, which results. And by lash out 3 is sequencing question. The alpha person finds settler emergence tends to resolve us with complete rejection settler sovereignty. 4 competing ethical endorphins are compatible. We use the permanent form of ethics and links to the critique because it attempts to assimilate all natives into existence. For some universal system or using negative ethical system, the app because settler futurities unethical must be rejected, but the app corrupts are also called Heart 14. The problematic link that indigenous peoples have to engage in states legal political discourses engaging assumes for the structure of domination drives legitimacy by excluding indigenous principles from the political settings indigenous people have to become are yet so incredibly skilled by the participation in political practices. However, efforts to engage in secure recognition of these rights have not only failed but served to reproduce the racist economic and political configurations, mark out political configurations. They say double bind, but it isn't a real argument. Firms are just a competition, not an advocacy in itself. So any risk of the link means it's absolute. The other firm is intrinsic, rejected because it makes being neg impossible. We're across by all the stuff about alpha bias. They say Swayze floors all fails. Alternative material decall doesn't fail. We fiat sellers go to non-native land. Indigenous nations have different understandings of land. They still coexist peacefully, self-sustain without relying on the federal government moves. Conditional clauses of decolonization, that's a tucking. It sells better than their app because all of their authors advocate for it. That was done above. The reading of the recard is wrong because material decall would eliminate the public domain. Now they say no fiat, but yes, fiat got good versus reciprocity. They get to fiat the advantages. Only faith that we get to use fiat to test the desirability of the app. 2 is education fiating that all allows us to focus on the nuance of the technical debate rather than if something can actually occur, allowing us to compare two advocacies as more real world increases our education on the topic. Next they say Lightfoot, but the reading of Lightfoot weaponizes one indigenous person against indigenous people that want decolonization, just indigenous people that are part of land movements are criminalized because they aren't as respectable as someone like Lightfoot. But you should view the ontology debate as a question of historical trajectory. Only we have examples. The first is the unilateral assimilation of all nations to the U.S. Citizenship Act of the Citizenship Act of 1924. The second is the termination of limited over 100 DAPL nations, but they say the topic is not unique to this app, but that's wrong because our K disproves the entire thesis of that.
We have
824.
824. Okay, I just need to look. Yeah. 422.
I really have to go to the bathroom, and I'll send it out.
Sorry, what did you say was that for you?
422.
I gave up a valuable opportunity to be here, which is that apparently our intercom is doing their announcements like pirates for Talk Like a Pirate Day. I'm experiencing that.
I had to experience that at 8 in the morning at work. I think I would. I'm not going to finish that sentence, but
It is the second best example of pirate intercomming at our school. One day, a group of students accidentally triggered the intercom in the entire school, and the office could not figure out how to shut it off for about 20 minutes. So every class just had to hear like random rumblings that were quite loud being played over every intercom, and it also meant that we couldn't do real intercom announcements. It was pretty funny. It's not often that literally nothing happens in an entire school for 40 minutes, but we found it. Excited. I'll do this on purpose.
What did you do?
The title of the doc.
Okay. It is advantage 1. Actually, there's only one advantage. Framing. T. The K. And then. What is that?
there's one framing TK just up.
Yeah.
Great.
Very confused. Alright, so we're good?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Cultural appropriation compounds psychological, social, political harms upon indigenous communities, perpetuating a violent history of settler dispossession that diminishes tribal agency and sovereignty while ignoring our demands for legal rights. They say we only increase standard that's wrong. They'll rule in favor of indigenous people. Reads says that the majority of their works are under copyright already. Anything else is status quo. They say authenticity. The act does not require a distinction on who is native. It says it's about a creative environment broadly. They say tribal disputes normal means is tribal consultation and does not assume established copyright. The banishment is a status quo and concludes out, of course, and cites an example of appropriation evaluating the effect of non-cultural nature of work. Solves current failures. They say logistics. No. 2EC Cumic says that it streamlines copyright. Obviously, decolonizing uses of fair use will not be removed. Now, the framing contention extension does not outweigh 1. Stats, low probability with high magnitude moves decision making correct for normative bias towards larger internal links. 2nd, erasure calculation for the greatest number is sacrificial genocide justifies large scale war over the absolute wars. That's Smith, Mitchell, and Oliver. They say impact evidence solves overcorrect for the ubiquity of extinction impacts and debate and persevere imagination to justify disides and dropped Oliver calculation of risk reduces people to objects and justifies genocide. Now, turns case and threats real. It's relevant. There's no turns case because we're ahead on structural uniqueness. Indigenous culture is already dissolving. That's free. Crossing spirit is skeptical. Internal to the dissat each diminish the impact by thousands of magnitude and no counterplan means air af, threats real is wrong, does not assume the persevere incentive, and IR threatening posture that justifies war abroad, that's all for now. Key subsets, we meet the plan, makes every fair use case interrogate the ontological nature of a work and the effect of cultural appropriation on its creative environment. No coherent violation. All copyright cases will apply to this standard. They say only indigenous read is saying ontological in the context of nature of work and not literally sectional ontology. Anyone can apply the app, just as they would rule more in favor of indigenous cases. They say limits, no standards apply. We don't expand copyright to include more things, only that fair use should be considered differently so that more things will not be fair use for indigenous communities. They say spillover. Google LLC in 2021 applied this similarly, but nothing happened. That's free. Now, Secol app, undisclosed new apps are good, incentivizes prep, critical thinking, and innovation, generic solve their offense, but don't justify antics. Default to reasonability, only evaluate desirability of plan. Their interpretations unpredictable, moods our offense, encourages sandbagging, and has no bright line. The only predictable reading is the disproven desirability of the plan text that outweighs one, intrinsic good, both teams rely on fairness, second, proximity. It's the only impact followed by the ballot models are inflating aggressive, third, participation. It's the otherwise there's no value to the activity, fourth is moral coherence, it's the only explanation. For their impacts, filter their offerings to the competitive nature of debate. We treat losses as technical failures, double down, read better arguments, and switch sides. Next examples are drowned out by other rounds. They say app choice A over correct, raises part 2I, B backwards. Next is the block, and clog, horse trading, cap K kills all laughs, repetition, compulsion is A taken out by ontology. And state key is offense will be below B. They regurgitate the same terms multiple times, which means they link harder. Object of research is unpredictable and not grounded in anything. They say predictable A, reps y, and anything I tags, words, etc. It's about what you justify. IPR can be critiqued from hundreds of different angles. Structural unfairness A is not solved by ballot, and that's irrelevant. Now, the permutation of both T's and indigenous bands do net benefits. One, theoretical indigenous groups have demanded state action and protection, favoring theoretical and non-specific objection to state erasure, and forecloses agency. UN Declaration, indigenous organizations prove advocacy as correlating lifeblood. Second, material traditions over the material of sovereignty, only protecting them and affirming their value helps the economic, social, and political elements of tribal communities. Drop, give back the land, and do the app resolves all of their offense and all concerns. They've said it solves better but does not assume the permutation. Every recognition link is not unique. The process of assimilative dispossession occurs when the federal government renders every cultural product into the public domain. It is a process of continuous erasure that renders indigenous violence invisible. First, economic link is non-unique and inevitable because economics always exist, but the app gives economic sovereignty through copyright. Rifkin links are also non-unique and doesn't assume indigenous activist groups already having IP calling on the federal government to follow on. Re-highlighting concede extinction is a metaphor for decolonization, which is a performative contradiction and turns K no matter in the world of the permutation. Now, go to the dissad. It's non-unique. Courts are backloaded. COVID-induced delays, funding inefficiencies, judge vaccines, and shortages. Criminal trials are in all causes. Hernandez, our card cites Georgia as an example, but in the beginning, it's descriptive of all court systems. IPR cases have jumped across the board, which means it thumbs. They only have one uniqueness card, which is bad. It doesn't say ASO's push is working, or that it's passed yet, or that the bill actually helps the courts. Now, there's no link. One, the second factor is a rare breed in court cases showing up for a mere sentence or two, and it's unlikely to change as Kunis. The app at worst is inconsequentially clogs the court. Second, they need a direct parted link to the app. The second factor is a small percentage of copyright decisions, which are a very small percentage of court cases. They say copyright litigation is resource consuming. This is not specific to the plan, and it's about the third factor. It does not say it hurts the courts, just that it hurts businesses, which is entirely distinct. Their next card is from 2014. It's about software cases. We know that litigation can happen, but their evidence is too generic and lacks an internal. Now, Oracle also dumps the court, ruled exclusively on second fair use factor and effects on creative environment for software, and Google versus Oracle. The only twincy answer was different case, which is 0. It was the same issue, but did not solve the impact. There's also no impact. One, only a small amount of climate cases are decided in the courts. I mean, larger initiatives are necessary. The twincy answer was answered above. Are you kidding me? Hold the line, because it definitely was not answered above. And they've hardly explained an internal. Second, except Buckman, climate is hardly a catastrophe. Temperatures are the same. What they were in 1990, just because he's in the Air Force doesn't mean he's biased and he's citing statistics. Turns cases also 0, which I did above. Now.
And international following, they didn't read it.
Yeah, they didn't read it.
3.
It seems like it was just wild. I don't agree with it at all. The whole premise of round robin should be that you can prepare for the teams and judges that you have. I'm holding out a small amount of hope that they are waiting until the end of round 2 when everyone's had an round. But I also don't know if that's true because it's not sequenced to be FNEG.
Oh, the judges?
Yeah.
They're releasing them one at a time.
Yeah, it's like for a while. be nice too. I would like to know that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gonna be the K, the disad, and then case, if there's time.
Alright.
I guess. Okay. But for case, it's just the advantage. Is anyone ready?
Let's go.
Sorry, let me just put it in a hard document.
You can only solve indigenous dispossession through decolonization. The recognition link is a material link to the plan, and decolonization definitely solves because the 1AR dropped alternative solvency, instead of upholding the racialized violence of the U.S., you should vote to completely decolonize the United States. That solves the entirety of case, but there's a framing issue because they have no coherent answer to the DAs on the perm, so hold the line because it's just a test of competition means that you vote neg if there's any risk of a link in alt solvency, which is at 100. The framework does not matter because I'm going for a material link in a
to do both, so all of the answers are applicable. Go to the ontology debate. You should view ontology as a question of historical trajectory that I do not have to win because I'm winning that the plan is bad in this instance, but I'm going to extend an example that one dropped. The unilateral assimilation of all natives into the U.S. Citizenship Act, or U.S. citizenship through the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 is a scary echoing of the act which forces indigenous people to increase their copyright protections only to have it still open to settler theft by colonial innovators. Once the copyright goes away, that proves that they actually co-opt indigenous knowledge and cause worse settler expropriation of indigenous knowledge in the future, which proves that they cannot solve a single thing of their affirmative. Go to the case debate. All of the ontology is supercharged by the fact that copyright cannot solve. The Orange evidence says that it only benefits non-indigenous people and outside actors that continue to commodify. They say that they do not cause any, or they do not force any sort of authenticity testing, which is wrong because they still force people to apply for copyrights, which proves that the state is still going to test authenticity of the affirmative, which increases settler power and is a disside to the affirmative that the permutation cannot solve because it is an increase in settler power. The Kenny evidence is super predictive and is in the context of increasing the fair use doctrine. Go to the dissad. Concede international actors, or international alt causes proves that the impact's inevitable. Yeah, I'm not going for it.
422.
I'm gonna go to the restaurant.
Appropriation. Then
Settler dispossession coheres itself through appropriation. In history, they've always used the logic of assimilation to invisibilize indigenous violence, from forcing them up into schools to taking up their copyright and their traditions. They have dropped our theory of power that settler dispossession can only be solved when we stop the appropriation of indigenous culture and the dissolution of their culture. It is very awkward that the 1AC has forwarded a narrative that indigenous groups are advocating for copyright protection because they're being stolen from the public domain and settlers, and the tuner then stands up to say that a gratuitous structure exists. Therefore, those indigenous movements do not matter. That will frame the direction of the link and how you should think about this debate when indigenous movements are on the ground and fighting for these rights in the first place, and supercharges the permutation. The first argument was the org evidence about how it benefits others. They have not explained this in the tuner. There's a warrant 0 for this, which means that if you write a ballot on it, you have to explain what the tuner said on it. But first, the org evidence is about the status quo. It says that traditions are not copyrighted. It does not assume the AF, which is about fair use. Second, it says the status quo. It says that works are relegated to the public domain, which is something obviously the AF is a link turn to. The next argument was authenticity. Testing dropped every one of our cross-section 2AC answer. The AF only considers the creative environment. It does not authenticity test between native people. We should command F. The 1AC on where you think it says this. Instead, it says that we should consider everyone's creative environment and how it affects their copyright. Not necessarily. We just say that it would affect indigenous people more because they would explain how culture affects their traditions. The next argument was the Kenny evidence. They've dropped the Kenny evidence that we read in the 2AC on the critique that says that his conclusion is that even if these things are bad, we should still consider them because they could be used for good purposes. And Framing doesn't matter, but we believe we should weigh the case. The entire 1AC was a reason why ontology is wrong and a reason why our theory of power of true. Either way, I'm going to go for a permutation and link turn. They say sidewise, new app, etc. It doesn't matter because they've dropped all of our answers. New apps are good because they encourage innovation. There's no bright line for what there is. But weight framework doesn't matter. You should be able to weigh the case versus the links. Otherwise, that removes fairness because it makes them compete off of every singular, unhighlighted, etc. word in the 1AC, which is an impossible standard. It makes it impossible to be app. Instead, we should get to weigh the case because it is key, because our defense of our epistemology of the 1AC is a defense of our consequences, the critique. Extend the permutation at the top. There are 2 net benefits that are dropped. First is a theoretical. Indigenous demands have demanded state action and protection. They have called on the federal government to follow on. The framing issue is that they already have intellectual property protection. Many of them have them on their tribes, but they're using copyright, and they want the federal government to follow on to those things because they believe that they should have ability to have a legal shield instead of allowing settlers to just use those things because they do not have protection in the status quo. That's the Carpenter, Farley, and Reed card from the 1AC. Second is that it's theoretical and non-specific objections. They have not read a specific link to the app about fair use, which would frame your analysis and make you not risk the neg ballot. It creates erasure because you've erased all of the indigenous matters. That creates an assimilative project that assumes that all issues should be resolved under the same way, i.e. only giving back the land when there are other small, minute issues like the app that could work in that direction. The Lightfoot evidence and ontology debate was not dropped. We extended it here in the 1AR. The UN Declaration and the activist groups are all proof that indigenous activism is good, and anything else that assumes that we cannot use state action is instead really bad and diminishes their agency. Second is material. They've dropped the AF. Traditions uphold sovereignty, and stealing them destroys their economic, political agency. Do both, which gives back the land and also applies fair use, has no deficit because you can give back the land, you can drive all settlers off the land, and also give them the tools to be used copyright if they choose to do so. All of their links do not assume the perm plus their app. There's no coherent explanation for why we cannot get settlers off the land and also apply copyright. If settlers are off the land, then the copyright protection doesn't matter, but if they do not drive them off the land, they still have they might also be oppressed. Now the arguments, the recognition links are all non-unique. They're dropped. The public domain is erasure. It renders indigenous violence invisible because they say they can all relegate to the public domain. The app is a link turn because it strategically uses the state against the state because it relegates them to not be able to appropriate from the public domain. They've also dropped that the app creates economic sovereignty and copyright, which solves their arguments about building indigenous sovereignty and how it gets co-opted. There's no explanation for co-option. The tuner has explanation 0 for co-option. Our argument is you can drive them off the land, which is utopian fiat, maybe, but also that there would be no reason why they could then infringe upon indigenous groups. There's only a race that the perm solves. Now the alternative cannot solve the case. We said on the case flow that they'd say it's the only way to solve it, and it turns the case through literal quotes from the 1AR that the tuner has nothing on. Besides, they've they've dropped the case, which means that you err at finding perm questions. Another framing issue is that the tuner had one instance of alt explanation, and it was, quote, "We decolonize the world." Hold the line. If you don't know what that means, you can't vote on it. They have zero explanation of what it does, how it solves, etc. Then they feel everything. The links are not unique. The app has two major deficits. There's only a risk that the permutation solves because it resolves all of the links.
Give it